What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Show, where I, Graham G.S. Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network and on Peacock, and today we're talking the latest episode of WWE Chronicle on Damian Priest. These chronicles are always really well done. I just recently watched the Edge one from like a month ago. I was really late to the party in watching it, but it was really, really good, and I say this every single time, but like the Bianca Belair one from a few months ago, I think that was from back in January or February, that was fantastic. Really every episode that I've seen over the last 3 years has been really, really good. So if you haven't already and you're new to the series, go back and check out all the other installments. They're just great stuff. The Damian Priest one was no exception. This takes place from January 31st, which was the Royal Rumble, where he made his main roster debut, all the way through April 27th, which was just a few short weeks ago after WrestleMania. So he talks about how he was born in New York City, but his parents lived in the Bronx. His mom and dad, when they split up, his mom took him to Puerto Rico with her upon, their divorce. And they didn't have much, which really led him to appreciating everything positive that came his way. And not only did you have to, earn everything that you got, but you had to sacrifice a lot for everything you got as well. His first exposure to wrestling growing up was specifically the Puerto Rican wrestling scene. Carlito's dad, Carlos Colon's promotion, World Wrestling Council, I believe it's called. So he followed a lot of his work. Savio Vega inspired him. Even Carlito inspired him, because seeing those guys come from Puerto Rico and then go on to great success in a WWE inspired him to kind of do the same. So he moved back with his dad in New York, and that was when he started training in mixed martial arts, MMA. And he practiced that for 10 years straight, he said, which is really impressive. And he won some championships in the New York area. Compared to his mom, his dad was a lot rougher, was a lot more strict. But he looks back on that time now with his dad a lot more positively than he probably did then. It wasn't the greatest growing up period, but he looks back on it now and sees how that made him into who he is today. And he looks back at it as bonding time with his dad. And his dad really pushed him to be the best. So once his dad closed down his MMA school and moved away, it kind of left Damian in limbo. He didn't really know what he wanted to do, did some odd jobs, had no clue what he wanted to do next. And that was when his friend from high school presented him the idea of trying out this wrestling thing that they used to watch while they were in high school. And while he first started doing wrestling, when he first got into it, he struggled for several years, because he wasn't one of those guys who could solely make money off of doing wrestling. He was doing other jobs as well. So he would have to take time off of work or go immediately from work to his show, sometimes with his gear right under his work clothes. And it was tough. It was a really tough time for him, getting into the business initially, but he loved it so much he made it work. So he couldn't get by in just the wrestling, but he also did bouncing. He fell in love with music, and he didn't have that childhood home he can go back to. He didn't really have a lot of that because he bounced around from Puerto Rico to then New York. So because he didn't have that, music kind of filled that void for him. And he's always loved the attention, he said, and that's when he starts talking about the downward spiral that he kind of embarked on, unfortunately, and how instead of just, not only was he continuing to do what he was doing, which wasn't good, he also got worse. He got lazier, he put in less work, and he got really overweight. I've never seen these pictures before of Damian from earlier on in his career, where he was like, maybe not grotesquely overweight, but he was a lot bigger than he is now, I will say that much. So it got to a point where his employer at one point, probably while he was working at a bar or as a bouncer or whatever, because we see that picture, he told Damian, listen, I'm glad to give you more opportunities, give you more responsibilities, give you a raise, but if we do, you got to give up the wrestling thing. And Damian knew at that point, absolutely not. So he gave that up, and he knew it was time to get motivated about his career, because this was all that he had. He put in his 2 weeks, he left that job, and that was all that he had at that point. He had nothing saved, no money saved. So the wrestling thing, he really had to start getting serious about it. Then they kind of fast forward to his Royal Rumble debut back in January, recap that. The strong showing that he had, he eliminated a bunch of people, including Hall of Famer Kane, which was cool. And he talks about how he's always wanted more. And he also calls his Raw debut the next night, where he beat Miz 1-on-1, cool as well, considering Miz is a former world champion. So they fast forward to May 8th, or rather, I'm sorry, today's May 8th, I think, or yesterday was May 8th. They fast forward to February 8th, where we see him having a catch with Riddle, of all people, actually. And they recap his history with Riddle from the independent scene. They've won tag team titles together. They've had matches against each other. They've been close and friends for a really long time now. A lot longer than I thought, actually. I knew they had history before WWE, but not as extensively as they did, which was really surprising to me. And Riddle brings up how great of a guy he is, and that unlike a lot of people, not only does Damian want this to be in WWE, he needs this. He's always needed this, which is what separates him from the rest of the pack. They show footage of Damian's 2015 WWE tryout at the PC, the typical, footage of him cutting a promo. And it actually, honestly, all things considered, was pretty good. Considering Damian wasn't much of a promo guy before coming to WWE, because I followed his work in Ring of Honor, and I don't remember him cutting many promos at all. I mean, he was kind of doing that demon shtick for a while, and I always enjoyed his work, but he wasn't really known for being a talker. But I thought with what, given the circumstances, and that it was 6 years ago, his promo at the PC wasn't too bad, to be honest. But anyway, so he lost a lot of weight after he started getting motivated about the wrestling. Lost around 100 pounds, I think he said, by around 2014, just in time for the WWE tryout. Called it the hardest 3 days of his life. And at the end of it, the coaches and the trainers and everyone said they really liked him, and if it was up to them, he'd be hired. But unfortunately, he didn't get the spot on the roster because the company had nothing for him at that time. So he kept contacting them. He called back the following year, and the year after that, and maybe one more time after that, and they said, we have nothing for you. So he kept getting the same response, and that told him, listen, didn't work out. This isn't going anywhere. Why continue to bothering them, whatever. And then it got to a point where they just called him. And he signed in October of 2018, and it probably was because he built up a name for himself on the indie scene, and he probably would have done well 5-6 years ago in WWE. But the thing is that I think having that background in Ring of Honor as the World Television Champion, having some great matches with a variety of opponents, really put him on the map. And he came in at just the perfect time in late 2018, along with Riddle and Keith Lee and people like that. So, he had a pretty decent run early on, had some good matches in 2019, but he didn't really start to click until the Finn Balor match almost exactly a year ago, a TakeOver in Your House against Finn Balor. And it was just an awesome match, and he could tell as soon as the bell rung, even before that, as soon as the bell rang, he could feel himself. He was feeling himself that night. It just really started to click and fall in place for him. And that was when he started to get it. He went backstage, and Triple H and Shawn Michaels not only liked the match, but they were like, that's the guy that we want to see from you all the time going forward. And he's like, I get it now. So we also see him talk about going to a chiropractor and how that really changed his life, so to speak. It really has helped his body a lot, and doing chirotherapy and stuff like that. He's also formed a friendship with his doctor, which is cool. He said he's always looked up to Razor Ramon, which he's probably talked about that elsewhere before. I didn't know that. And that makes a lot of sense, just given his cool factor and how that's kind of inspired from Razor Ramon, Scott Hall. That makes a whole lot of sense. He actually got permission from Scott to do the Razor's Edge as a finisher. He doesn't do the Razor's Edge as the finisher, but he has done it a few times in WWE. They show footage of him doing it against Killian Dane at a TakeOver a few years ago. I think that'd be a better finisher than the Reckoning or whatever he calls it now. Look it up at the lights, or they renamed it the Crossroads. I honestly don't think the finisher looks good. I think the Razor's Edge would be cooler, but that's just... If he could do it to fucking Killian Dane, he could do it to pretty much anyone on that roster, if we're being honest here. He also found out from Hall another thing I never knew, which again, he's probably gone on the record of this before. Hall said that he used to do that surfer walk to the ring, like that cool looking walk, because he didn't want to be touched by fans. So by going in between them, it would eliminate the possibility, or at least lessen the possibility, of them touching him. And that makes a whole lot of sense, and he's kind of modeled himself after Hall, not because he doesn't want to touch the fans, but because he's kind of feeding off their energy before letting it go, if that makes sense. We see him being in a chiro chamber and kind of getting his body back in place, whatever. We saw Taker in a chiro chamber during his Last Ride documentary last year. It seems like it's incredibly cold, something I would never want to do, but if it helps the body, more power to him. He talks about how he was emotionally drained heading into WrestleMania. He was nervous, he was excited, blah, blah, blah. And then right when he got to WrestleMania, it all started to really, overcome him again, in a good way, in terms of being excited and realizing that he deserves to be here. He has earned this moment. And he wants that WrestleMania moment. He must have that WrestleMania moment, and he got it. He also talks about doing the virtual meet and greets beforehand, like the 2-minute virtual meet and greets, which is cool, honestly. If you can't meet these people in person at Access, charging them around the same amount. Granted, you're not actually meeting them, and you're not getting a signature or anything, I don't think. I mean, you can't, it's virtual. But to get a 2-minute conversation with these people is pretty cool. So I think it's worth the money. I think I might have said initially, like, oh, that's a waste. Like, you're not meeting them, so why would you justify paying $100 to fucking talk to them? But it is pretty cool to talk to these people for 2 minutes, so it really isn't much of a waste. But anyway, he likes getting to share his culture with the world alongside someone like Bad Bunny. And honestly, and I'll get to this in a second, but I thought this Chronicle would be all about the Bad Bunny stuff and, you know, their story and how cool it was to work with Bad Bunny. I honestly forgot Bad Bunny was even involved. No shit, like no joke here. I honestly forgot Bad Bunny was even involved in this whole thing until they mentioned him here, because they didn't really mention him at all. Going into this part of the documentary, they showed clips with him and Miz and Morrison and Priest backstage, but that was about it. And this was really all about Priest, as it should have been. So I thought that was a pleasant surprise. But yeah, you know, him and Bad Bunny are kind of, I believe, from the same part of Puerto Rico. So for them to share their culture with the world and seeing those flags in the audience, that's pretty fucking cool. They recapped the WrestleMania match, which was a lot of fun. Obviously, Bad Bunny stole the show with his performance, but Priest was very good as well. And that was as good of a debut as he could have asked for in his first ever WrestleMania, alongside Bad Bunny, an A-list celebrity in a lot of ways. I believe a Grammy Award winner, very well known within that industry, which is cool. So they show the backstage reaction upon him going backstage, being congratulated by a variety of people, specifically Triple H, who's obviously meant a lot to his career. And I talked to Damian about this a few weeks ago. Cheap plug, check out our interview here on the channel and on dailyddt.com, where we talked about the backstage reaction of Triple H and Vince and people like that. And we see him getting very emotional afterward, and how it really all started to sink in for him, how he deserves to be here, and how he fucking did it. It's fucking WrestleMania. That's what he said, and they bleeped it out, obviously. So I thought that was really cool. And then while the credits roll, they show footage of him being handed a printout picture of him at his absolute worst when he was really overweight. And the producer asks him, what would you say to this person about who you are now or whatever? And he's like, listen, just be the guy that lives his dream, before crumpling it up and throwing it on the ground. This was a great Chronicle. I learned a lot about Damian Priest that I didn't know before, and I've interviewed him twice. I've seen a lot of stuff with him in it. I've been following his career for a few years now. But we got to know him on a personal level here, and I thought that was really fucking cool. He came across wonderfully, and I really, really appreciated, like I said, that the focus was not on the Bad Bunny stuff solely. I mean, again, they really hardly mentioned Bad Bunny. We get some comments from Bad Bunny about how cool it was for him to work with a guy like Damian Priest and how they've kind of bonded and whatever. But the focus was really on Damian Priest here, which was great. And we got to know a lot about his journey and coming to WWE and arriving on the main roster and everything else. It was really like a mini 24 documentary. And it's only around 30 minutes, so it's well worth checking out on Peacock and on the WWE Network. So thank you guys for checking this out. It was a lot of fun watching it. I always look forward to these Chronicles and 24s and stuff like that. I am finally, a month later, in the process of watching the Broken Skull Sessions with Chris Jericho. So I'm hoping to finish that by the end of today and review it for tomorrow here on the channel. So keep an eye out for that. So be sure to like the video as well, this video that is, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. Hit the bell button as well to be notified every time a new video goes up. Enjoy Mother's Day, guys. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.